White is cleaner. It reveals the truth.
Today at school, a new room was announced. Her creator had something in mind. Danny was the first to enter. After some time, he came out. His face was blurred like a washed-out watercolor drawing. Black paint dripped from the holes where his eyes and mouth should have been.
It's very fun,
He said mechanically. Suddenly, a line formed. After a few days, the children's mouths disappeared. Their clothes faded to dusty gray. The children were losing their faces. Peppa was flipping through a notebook. Black, distorted faces flickered on the pages as if screaming. Suddenly, tentacles burst out of the paper and grabbed her by the arm. A burn remained on her skin. The room left traces. No one erased them. Peppa tried to preserve the colors, but the room kept erasing everything. The next day, all the students turned to Peppa in unison, with wide, identical smiles, and said in chorus,
White is cleaner. It reveals the truth.
"Now, it's her turn. Ahead is light that blinds thoughts. There's no way back." From the walls slowly emerged white silhouettes with distorted features, and black handprints appeared on the surfaces. They watched, they waited. Night fell. Peppa stood in the center of the white room. With trembling hands, Peppa wrote, "Yellow light, laughter, I." She tried to remember, but words no longer meant anything. She was the last. Silence remained, and Peppa, who no longer remembered anything. Peppa and George decided to take a walk in the forest and stumbled upon an old, abandoned house. It looked very gloomy. Broken windows, overgrown bushes, creaky door. Inside, it was dark and cold. Cracked portraits hung on the walls. Their eyes seemed alive. Suddenly, it became dark outside the window. At that moment, a strange woman appeared. The owner of the house. Her face was pale, and her eyes were cold and frightening. She smiled strangely and said,
Welcome. You shouldn't have come here.
Suddenly, she began to change. Her face distorted. Her eyes shone with bright red light, and something black flowed out of them. Peppa tried to run, but the door slammed shut by itself. The demon owner grabbed Peppa and George with her long claws. Their screams disappeared into the darkness. Everything around started to distort. The house's owner dragged the children into her dark basement. Peppa and George were tied up. Their mouths were covered with rags. The owner was boiling something murky in a huge cauldron and muttered,
Soon I will enjoy this.
Peppa turned around and saw Susie and Rebecca. They were also tied up and trembling with fear. Suddenly, a familiar, sinister whisper sounded. The door opened. Standing in the doorway was Evie, with tentacles and a sinister smile. She grabbed the house owner with one of her tentacles and swallowed her with a sinister sound. Afterward, Evie smiled sweetly but continued to radiate horror. The children were scared. They already knew what awaited them. Evie wasn't full yet and was planning to fix that. The pig family went on vacation to an old house in the middle of the forest. The house creaked with every step, and the trees outside the window didn't move even in the wind. Peppa and George were playing in the nursery. The parents were preparing food in the kitchen. At first, everything was going well. But in the evening, George noticed something outside the window.
He is already here.
He whispered. That night, George saw a silhouette of a strange tree through the window. He went outside to look at it. It was a mistake. In the morning, George was gone. Mom cried. Dad turned pale. The police didn't answer, so the parents went into the forest to look for him. They told Peppa not to go anywhere and not to open the door for anyone. Peppa was left alone. The parents walked along a creepy trail and ended up deep in the forest. Suddenly, they came across what had caused the nighttime sounds. A huge tree with arms and legs. Eyes and a creepy smile stood and looked at them. Meanwhile, Peppa was sitting in the living room. Suddenly, the TV turned on by itself. On screen was their forest. The camera slowly zoomed in on something between the trees. It was her parents hanging upside down. Then static and silence. Suddenly, the lights in the house went out. Fear gripped Peppa, but staying inside was dangerous. The monster knew where she was. Peppa tried to run through the forest to find help, but it had become denser than during the day. She walked along a trail and suddenly saw it, a creature resembling a tree. Tall, thin, yellow eyes, a huge mouth. It was staring directly at her.
Peppa, your family has been waiting.
Deleted Peppa Pig episode, The Basement. It all started as usual. Mommy noticed that the basement light was flickering. Daddy Pig went to check, and Peppa and George wanted to go with him. Daddy smiled, but he looked strange. The basement seemed very uninviting. Stone walls, a gray staircase, and a single dim bulb swinging overhead. When they descended, the door behind them closed on its own with a loud click. The light flickered. George looked back and disappeared without a sound, without a trace. Peppa ran to find him. Suddenly, doors appeared on the walls, low wooden doors like those in old cabinets. She opened one. Inside was George's old plush dinosaur, stained and dusty. It didn't move, but its eyes blinked. Suddenly, a projector light appeared on the wall. It turned on by itself. The film started playing frames, old recordings, as if from surveillance cameras. Peppa saw herself, but she was in a different basement, standing and looking into the camera, faceless. In one of the frames, there was George. He was shouting, but no sound came out. The camera jerked, and the image cut out. The floor near Peppa began to crack. Black liquid poured from the cracks. It moved toward her, as if alive. Peppa screamed, and suddenly, silence. The next morning, Peppa sat alone in the kitchen. Behind her was the basement, its door slowly opening. Something supernatural was moving toward her, getting closer with each step. Deleted Peppa Pig episode, The Living Toy. George loved his dinosaur, but that day, the toy fell into a place where it shouldn't have gone. George didn't know. Some toys find their owners on their own. When George disappeared, Peppa decided to look for him, but she had no idea. She would have to search not for her brother, but for what had taken him. The trail led to the nursery, where it all began. The door to the nursery swung open, and Peppa saw a giant dinosaur holding George in its claws.
Give him back!
Peppa shouted, but the dinosaur already knew his name. Peppa tried to rescue her brother, but the dinosaur swatted her away with its tail. George mumbled. His voice sounded strange, as if the dinosaur was learning how to be him. Peppa grabbed a toy hammer and struck the dinosaur's paw. It dropped George.
Run!
Peppa yelled, but George didn't move. His eyes turned red. In the morning, George returned, but Peppa saw that now the dinosaur was always watching him. At night, a voice was heard behind the door.
The little dinosaur. Mine.
He waiting, because children can be lost so easily, especially when they think they've been found. Deleted episode of Peppa Pig, The Evil Force. An ordinary day, Peppa decided to draw, starting with a simple apple. But something went wrong, and the apple simply dissolved into reality. Peppa couldn't believe her eyes. Her desire to test her new power led to the next step. Each new drawing disappeared from her world. Soon,
Wow!
Peppa realized her power knew no bounds. She left home in the name of experimentation and set a new goal: the school. Every stroke of her marker became a new threat. The school began to vanish from reality. The facade flickered and dissolved away. Peppa looked at the empty field. She felt like a god in a world of ink, but someone was watching her, always watching. Peppa sensed that something was wrong and decided to return. But what she saw shocked her, freezing her with fear. The room seemed empty, but that was a lie. Sitting before her was her doppelganger, drawing something. With each stroke, he recreated her appearance. Frightening and alien, Peppa froze in horror, realizing her power had gained its own will. The doppelganger looked at her with hollow eyes as she slowly dissolved into the space. Unable to save herself,